In 1902, Chicago, a blind slave master shocked an entire city with a decision no one saw coming. For decades, he had lived off the labor of the very people he claimed to own, unable to see their faces, their suffering, or their silent resistance. Then, one winter morning, he summoned them all and did the unthinkable. He signed away every house, every acre, every dollar, and handed his entire fortune to his slaves. Some said guilt finally found him. Others whispered that blindness had taught him truths sight never could. But whatever changed his heart would rewrite dozens of lives overnight. This is the forgotten story of a man who lost his vision and gave freedom instead. The darkness came gradually, then all at once. For Silas Brennan, the world had been dimming for 3 years, the edges of his vision fraying like an old tapestry, left too long in the sun. First went the periphery, then the colors, until finally, on a bitter January morning in 1900, he woke to find himself wrapped in absolute blackness. The Chicago skyline, the lake's gray waters, the face of his own reflection, all of it vanished as though God himself had drawn a curtain across creation. Some men might have called it divine punishment. Silas Brennan, at 72 years of age, knew better than to call it anything but what it was, a reckoning. Now, in the autumn of 1902, Silas sat in the drawing room of his limestone mansion on Prairie Avenue, his fingers tracing the carved armrest of his chair. The wood was walnut, imported, expensive. Everything in this house was expensive. He had built his fortune on the backs of others, and every brick of this edifice stood as testament to that truth. "Mr. Brennan, your tea, sir." The voice belonged to Isaiah Washington, though Silas no longer needed the voice to identify him. Isaiah walked with a slight drag of his left foot, a limp earned from a break that had never properly healed. Silas knew this because he had been the one who caused it 37 years ago, on a plantation in Georgia that no longer existed. "Thank you, Isaiah," Silas said, reaching out to accept the saucer. His hands, once steady enough to sign contracts worth thousands, now trembled like leaves in wind. Isaiah said nothing, but Silas could hear him standing there, waiting, always waiting. 40 years of waiting. "Sit with me," Silas said. There was a pause, thick with decades of protocol and hierarchy. Then, slowly, the sound of Isaiah lowering himself into the chair opposite. "Isaiah," Silas began, and found his throat closing around the words. He had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in the darkness behind his eyes. But now, facing the reality of it, the words scattered like startled birds. "I need to tell you something about my will." "Sir, I don't think—" "Please," Silas held up one trembling hand. "Please, just listen." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the distant sound of carriages on the street outside. Chicago was growing, always growing, pushing upward and outward, building itself into something magnificent. Silas would never see it, but he could feel its energy in the vibrations of the floorboards, hear it in the symphony of construction and commerce that never quite ceased. "Before I came to Chicago," Silas said, "before the war, before everything changed, I was a different man. Or perhaps I was the same man, but the world allowed me to be worse." He set down his teacup, afraid he might drop it. "You know this. You were there." "Yes, sir." Isaiah's voice was carefully neutral, the tone of a man who had learned long ago to give nothing away. "I owned 43 people," Silas continued, and the number felt like ashes in his mouth. 43 human souls, and I treated them as property, as things. You were one of them, from the time you were 7 years old until you were 22. The war freed us, Isaiah said quietly. The war freed you from legal bondage, Silas corrected. But I brought you north with me, hired you, I said, gave you work and wages, and you came, you and 12 others who had nowhere else to go, because what choice did you have? I offered you a wage, yes, but I had already stolen your youth, your family, your very autonomy. What kind of freedom is it to be employed by your former master? Isaiah remained silent. What could he say? They both knew the truth of it. Silas's mind drifted back across the years, to a plantation house in Georgia, to the humid summers and the cotton fields stretching to the horizon. He had inherited the land from his father, who had inherited it from his father, and with it came the people. That was how he had thought of it then. The property came with people, the same way it came with tools and livestock. He had been educated at the finest schools, had read philosophy and poetry, had considered himself a man of culture and refinement, yet somehow he had looked into the eyes of other human beings and seen only labor, only value measured in bales of cotton and dollars in his ledger. I was cruel, Silas said, and his voice cracked. Not the cruelest, perhaps. I never sold children away from their mothers. I didn't... He stopped, realizing the grotesque absurdity of defending himself by listing atrocities he had not committed. But I used the whip. I used fear. I used power that should never have been mine to wield. Mr. Brennan, your leg, Silas interrupted. You were 14. Do you remember? The silence that followed was answer enough. You had tried to run, Silas continued, the memory sharp despite the decades. Made it almost to the river before the dogs found you. And I... He pressed his palm against his forehead, as if he could push the memory back into the darkness where it belonged. I wanted to make an example. So I did. I broke your leg, and I made the others watch, and I told myself it was necessary, that it was the way things were done, that you needed to learn. It was a long time ago, Isaiah said, but his voice was tight. Not long enough, never long enough. Silas reached out, groping for the table beside him, finding the papers he had placed there earlier. I've had my lawyer draw up documents, everything I own. This house, the properties I've acquired, the investments, the accounts, all of it is to be divided among those of you who came north with me. 13 of you survived the journey and the years since. 13 of you are still here in Chicago, working for wages that could never repay what was taken. He heard Isaiah's sharp intake of breath. You can't. That's not Mr. Brennan. The law allows me to dispose of my property as I see fit, Silas said. My lawyer was shocked naturally, tried to talk me out of it, suggested that if I wanted to be charitable, I could leave you each a small sum, enough for a fresh start. But I don't want to be charitable. Charity implies generosity, and there is nothing generous about returning what should never have been taken in the first place. Your family. I have no family, Silas said flatly. My wife died in childbirth 40 years ago. The child died with her. My brother drank himself to death before the war ended. There is no one who has a claim on this wealth except those who built it. He could hear Isaiah standing now, pacing, the uneven rhythm of his gait filling the room. Sir, the others, they won't. People will say, this will cause trouble. Let them say what they will. Let there be trouble. Silas felt a fierce heat rising in his chest. I've lived my entire life taking the easy path, the profitable path, the path that required me to ignore the screams and the suffering and the fundamental evil of what I was doing. I will not die on that path. Why now? Isaiah asked, and for the first time, Silas heard something raw in his voice. Why, after all these years, why now? Why? Silas gestured to his eyes. I thought, at first, that the blindness was the punishment, that God was taking my sight as penance for my sins. But I was wrong. The blindness is a gift. A gift? For 40 years, I looked at you and saw a servant. I looked at Rachel and saw my housekeeper. I looked at Samuel and saw my driver. Even here, even in Chicago, even paying wages, I saw you as extensions of my will, my comfort, my needs. Silas's hands clenched into fists. But now, in the darkness, I cannot see what you do for me. I can only hear your voices, feel your presence, and in that darkness, I finally began to see you as you are, as you always were. He heard Isaiah sink back into the chair. Every day, Silas continued, I hear you moving through this house. I hear Rachel humming while she works, and I realize I never once asked her what songs she likes to sing. I hear Samuel laughing with the grocers, and I realize I know nothing of his humor, his joys. I hear all of you, living your lives in the margins of mine. And I understand finally what I could not see when I had eyes. And what is that? That you are whole. That you have always been whole. That every moment I spent thinking of you as less than human was a failure not of your humanity, but of my own. The clock struck 4, the chimes echoing through the house. Silas knew that soon the others would begin gathering for the evening meal. Rachel would be finishing the preparations in the kitchen. Thomas and Mary would be returning from the market. Samuel would be settling the horses. 13 people going about their lives, living in a house bought with money earned from their stolen labor. I know this doesn't fix anything, Silas said. I know that giving you property and money cannot give you back your childhoods, your families, the years taken from you. I know that I cannot die and be forgiven simply because I wrote some words on paper. Then why do it? Because it is what I can do. Because doing nothing would be worse. Because I need you to know that I know what I was, what I did, and that I am sorry. The word felt inadequate, a pebble offered against a mountain of grief. I am so sorry. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Isaiah said quietly, I had a brother. Silas's breath caught. He was younger than me, 5 years old when you sold him to pay off a gambling debt. Isaiah's voice was steady, but Silas could hear the weight of decades of grief beneath each word. His name was Marcus. He cried for our mother for 3 days straight before they took him away. I never saw him again, never knew if he lived or died, if he was treated well or poorly, if he remembered us. Silas felt tears streaming down his face, hot against his cold cheeks. Isaiah, You asked why I came north with you, Isaiah interrupted. You offered wages, yes, but that wasn't why. I came because I was 22 years old, and I had never known anything but your plantation. I came because I was terrified of the world beyond those gates. I came because even though I hated you, you were the devil I knew, and that felt safer than the devils I didn't. I'm sorry, Silas whispered. For Marcus, for your leg, for all of it. I'm sorry. I know, Isaiah said, and there was something in his voice that Silas couldn't quite identify. Not forgiveness. He had no right to ask for that, no right to expect it. But perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps recognition that the apology, however inadequate, had been offered. The others, Silas said, wiping at his eyes. They should know. They should all know what I'm planning. Should have a say in whether they even want. They'll want it, Isaiah said. Not because it makes things right, but because we've earned it. Every day we've worked for you. Every year we've spent building your wealth and comfort. We've earned every penny of it and more. I need to tell them myself. I need to explain. Then we'll call them together. Tonight, after supper. Isaiah stood, and Silas heard him moving toward the door. Then he paused. Mr. Brennan? That brother I told you about. Marcus? Yes? I found him 3 years ago. He's in St. Louis, has a family, runs a small grocery. He survived. We write letters now. Silas felt his heart constrict. I'm glad, truly. I didn't tell you to make you feel better, Isaiah said. I told you because you should know that we survived despite you, that we built lives and found family and created joy in the spaces where you left only pain. Your money, your property, it's owed to us, but it's not what defines us. It never was. Then he was gone, leaving Silas alone in the darkness with the weight of his own history. The hours between afternoon and evening stretched like taffy. Silas remained in his drawing room, listening to the sounds of the household. He could hear Rachel in the kitchen, the rhythmic chop of her knife against the cutting board. She had been 11 years old when he bought her mother from a failing plantation in South Carolina. The mother had died of fever within a year. Rachel had been alone at 12, and Silas had put her to work in the kitchen, told himself he was being merciful by keeping her close to the house, away from the brutal labor of the fields. Merciful. The word tasted like poison now. Through the wall, he could hear Thomas and Mary's voices, low and steady. They had married on the plantation, one of the few marriages Silas had allowed. He had congratulated himself on his benevolence at the time, had even given them a Sunday afternoon for celebration. Never mind that he had separated them for months at a time, sending Thomas to work his father's other property 3 counties away. Never mind that he had sold their first child, a daughter, when Mary was caught teaching her letters from a discarded primer. The grandfather clock ticked on. Silas thought about time, how much of it he had wasted, how much of it he had stolen from others. 43 people over the course of 15 years. Some he had inherited, some he had purchased, a few he had traded for like livestock. 43 people, each with their own story, their own losses, their own grief that he had caused or compounded. Samuel passed by the door, his heavy footsteps unmistakable. Silas called out to him. Samuel, do you have a moment? The footsteps stopped, then approached. Yes, sir. Please sit. Silas gestured to the chair Isaiah had occupied earlier. He heard Samuel settle into it with a soft grunt. I wanted to ask you something, Silas began. When we came north, why did you really come? You were one of the oldest, 28 years old. You had known freedom for 3 years by then. Why follow me to Chicago? Samuel was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. You know my wife died, Catherine. She died 6 months after the war ended in childbirth. The baby too. Silas felt his chest tighten. He had known this dimly, but had never asked, never inquired deeply into Samuel's grief. I had nowhere to go, Samuel continued. Catherine's family had been sold off years before. My own mother and father, my brothers. I never knew what happened to them after they were sold when I was young. The only people I knew, the only faces that were familiar, were the others from your plantation. When you said you were going north, starting fresh, offering wages. It felt like the only thread I had to hold on to. I'm sorry, Silas whispered. About Catherine, about your family, about all of it. I loved her, Samuel said, and there was something fierce in his voice. You never knew that, never asked. To you, we were people who worked, who existed for your benefit. You never wondered about our loves, our losses, our dreams. But I loved her. I loved her laugh and the way she sang while she worked, and the way she touched my face before we slept. And when she died, I had no one to mourn with because you had scattered everyone I knew across the South. Silas wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but he knew he had no right. What was she like? He asked instead. Tell me about her. And Samuel did. For the next hour, sitting in that drawing room, he told Silas about Catherine, about how they had met when they were both teenagers, how they had courted in secret stolen moments, how they had built a life in the tiny cabin they'd been assigned, how she had tended a small garden and dreamed of having enough land to grow flowers, not just vegetables, how she had been funny and stubborn and kind, how she had held Samuel when he despaired, how she had believed in freedom even when it seemed impossible. Silas listened and wept and understood that this was merely one story of the 43 he had never bothered to learn. 43 people, each with loves and dreams and grief. And he had seen only labor, only property, only numbers in his ledger. When Samuel finished, the sun was setting. Orange light slanted through the windows, though Silas could not see it. He could only feel its warmth on his face, a reminder of all the beauty in the world he had missed while staring at his account books. Thank you, Silas said, for telling me, for letting me know her, even this late. I didn't tell you for your sake, Samuel said, standing. I told you for hers, so someone would know she existed, that she mattered, that she was more than just a name in your plantation records as Catherine House Servant, deceased 1865. She mattered, Silas said. She matters. They all matter. That's what I'm trying to say with the will, with the property. It's inadequate, I know, but... It is inadequate, Samuel agreed, but it's something. And sometimes something is better than nothing, even if it will never be enough. That evening, they gathered in the dining room. Silas sat at the head of the table, a position he had insisted on, despite Isaiah's suggestion that they meet in the parlor. If he was going to do this, he would do it without the pretense of equality that had never truly existed. He heard them filing in, identifying each by their footsteps, their breathing, the small sounds they made. Rachel with her quick, light step, Samuel with his heavy tread, Thomas and Mary together, whispering, Eliza, who cleaned the upstairs, humming under her breath. All 13 of them, ranging in age from 30 to 65, all carrying the weight of what had been. Thank you for coming, Silas began, and his voice sounded small in the large room. I've asked you here because I need to tell you about decisions I've made regarding my estate. He felt the tension in the room, the collective holding of breath. Before we came north, I was your master. The law called you my slaves, my property. The law was evil, but I participated in that evil willingly. I cannot change the past. I cannot return what was taken from you, your freedom, your childhoods, your families. But I can acknowledge the debt I owe. Silas reached for the papers before him, papers he couldn't read, but that he had read to him 100 times. Everything I own is to be divided equally among the 13 of you. The house, the properties I rent out on the south side, the investments, the accounts. All of it. My lawyer has drawn up the papers. You will each receive an equal share. The house itself will be placed in trust for all of you collectively, to be used or sold as you see fit. The silence was absolute. I don't expect forgiveness, Silas continued. I don't expect gratitude. This is not charity. This is debt, partial payment for what can never truly be repaid. If you wish to refuse, I will respect that decision. If you wish to accept and then use the money to spit on my grave, I will have earned that too. Why? The voice belonged to Rachel. After all these years, why? Silas turned his head toward her voice. Because I was blind long before I lost my sight. Because I am dying, and I will not die, having failed to acknowledge what I was and what I did. Because you deserved better than what I gave you, and this is all I have left to give. You're dying. This from Samuel, concern evident in his tone, and that too was a knife in Silas's heart. That this man could still feel concern for his former tormentor. The doctors say I have perhaps 6 months. My heart is failing, as it should have failed long ago. Silas spread his hands on the table. I'm telling you this not to elicit sympathy, but so you understand that this is not a whim or a fancy. This is my last act, the only meaningful one I may ever perform. What happens to us until then? Eliza asked. Do we stay here? Do we leave? That is your choice, Silas said. I hope you'll stay, not for my sake, but because this is your home now, or it will be. The wages I pay you will continue. When I die, the house and all my assets will be transferred according to the terms of my will. My lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, has all the documents. He's not happy about it, but he'll execute the will as written. Thomas spoke up, his voice quiet. The neighbors, the other folk on Prairie Avenue, they won't like this. No, Silas agreed, they won't. There will be talk. There may be legal challenges, though my lawyer assures me the will is sound. There may be worse than talk. I wish I could protect you from that, but I cannot. All I can do is ensure that the law is on your side this time. Mary's voice was sharp. You think some papers make up for what you did? You think money fixes the years you stole? No, Silas said simply. I don't think that at all, but doing nothing would be worse. Leaving my wealth to some distant cousin I've never met, or to some institution that would use it to build monuments to men like me. That would be worse. This is inadequate. It is incomplete. It is perhaps cowardly, coming as it does only when I'm facing death. But it is what I can do, and so I'm doing it. The silence stretched out, broken finally by Isaiah. We should discuss this among ourselves, he said. Without Mr. Brennan present. Silas nodded. Of course, I'll retire to my room. Take all the time you need. He stood, and Samuel moved to assist him, but Silas held up a hand. I know the way. He did too. In his blindness, he had learned every step, every turn, every corner of this house. He made his way up the stairs slowly, carefully, and shut himself in his bedroom. They deliberated for hours. Silas sat in his chair by the window, feeling the night air cool on his face, listening to the muffled sounds of conversation from below. He did not try to hear their words. Whatever they decided, he would accept. It was nearly midnight when Isaiah knocked on his door. Come in, Silas called. We've talked, Isaiah said. Argued, really. There's a lot of anger in that room, Mr. Brennan, a lot of hurt. As there should be. Rachel wanted to refuse, said she wouldn't take blood money. Thomas agreed with her. Mary said we should take it and use it to help others who suffered as we did. Eliza said We should take it because we earned it, every penny. Samuel said he didn't know what was right anymore. And you? Silas asked. I said that refusing wouldn't change the past, that the money exists because we built it, whether we were called slaves or servants or employees. That maybe the question isn't whether we deserve it. We do. But what we do with it going forward. What did you decide? We'll accept it, Isaiah said. Not because we forgive you. Some of us might. Someday. Most of us won't. But because it's ours by right. And because we've learned that waiting for justice means you'll wait forever. Sometimes you have to take what's owed and build something new with it. Silas felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank us. We're not doing you a favor. Isaiah paused. But there's a condition. Name it. We want to establish a school for colored children, to teach them reading and writing and mathematics, free of charge. We want to use part of the property for that, and we want it named after the people we lost. Marcus, my mother, Rachel's husband who died in the fields, Mary's daughter who was sold before she could walk, all of them. We want them remembered. Silas bowed his head. Yes. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. And we want you to teach there. Silas's head snapped up. What? You were educated at the finest schools, Isaiah said. You can read Greek and Latin. You understand mathematics and history and philosophy. All that knowledge, you can use it now for something good. Teach the children. Teach them what you know. Let that be your penance. I don't think I can. You can, Isaiah said firmly. You'll have help, of course. We're not expecting you to run the place. But you can teach. Even blind you can teach. You can tell the children about history, about the world, about learning. And maybe, in doing that, you can begin to balance the scales. Silas felt tears streaming down his face again. I would be honored. Truly honored. Don't mistake this for kindness, Isaiah warned. This is strategy. We know that having a white man involved, even one who's dying, will help protect the school from those who would try to shut it down. Your name still carries weight in this city, even if your reputation will be mud once people know what you've done. I understand, and still, I would be honored. Isaiah was quiet for a moment, then said, There's something else you should know. We're not staying because of you. We're staying because this house, these rooms, we've made them ours over the years. We've created lives here, friendships, a community. We're not leaving because some white folks on Prairie Avenue might not like us owning property in their neighborhood. We're staying because it's ours now, and we're done running. Good, Silas said. That's good. The months that followed were difficult. Word spread quickly through Chicago's upper crust about Silas Brennan's intentions. The reaction ranged from shock to disgust to outright hostility. Former friends ceased their visits. Business associates sent curt letters severing their relationships. The newspapers, once friendly to Silas's commercial interests, published editorials questioning his mental state. There were legal challenges, as predicted. Distant relatives Silas had never met emerged from the woodwork, claiming their right to his estate. Mr. Abernathy earned every penny of his substantial fee, fighting them off, establishing precedent after precedent for Silas's right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. Through it all, Silas taught. Rachel and Isaiah had converted the carriage house into a schoolroom, and 3 times a week, children from the South Side would come to learn. Silas taught them history, real history, including the parts that made him and men like him the villains. He taught them literature and mathematics and geography. He taught them that education was power, that knowledge was freedom, that they had every right to reach for the stars. The children called him Professor Brennan, and he had never felt less deserving of a title. In March of 1903, on a morning when the lake wind still carried winter's bite, Silas Brennan died in his sleep. He was 73 years old. They buried him in Graceland Cemetery, in a modest plot he had purchased himself. There was no grand funeral, no long procession of mourners. Just 13 people who had once been called his property, standing in the cold, saying goodbye to the man who had owned them, employed them, and finally, inadequately, tried to make amends. Isaiah spoke because someone had to. He was not a good man, Isaiah said, his words carrying across the empty cemetery. He was a man who did evil things and profited from them. He was our master, our enslaver, the source of pain that echoes through our lives even now. But at the end, he tried to be better. He failed more than he succeeded. He gave back what should never have been taken. He acknowledged what should never have been denied. He died knowing he could never be forgiven, never be redeemed, never undo what he had done. And perhaps that knowledge was its own kind of punishment. Rachel stepped forward, dropping a handful of earth onto the casket. "We survive," she said simply. "Despite men like him, because of men like him, in defiance of men like him, we survive, and we will thrive." One by one, they each spoke or remained silent, dropped earth or simply stood, marked the passing or simply endured. Then they walked back to Prairie Avenue together, to the house that was now theirs, to the school that would bear the names of their lost ones, to the future they would build, with the wealth their labor had created. The Freedmen's Academy, as it came to be known, operated for 47 years. It educated thousands of children, sent hundreds to college, produced teachers and doctors and lawyers and artists and leaders. The house on Prairie Avenue became a boarding house for colored students, a meeting place for activists, a symbol of what could be built from the ashes of what had been. And in a small corner of the school's library, in a place of neither honor nor shame, but simply acknowledgement, there hung a photograph of Silas Brennan, with a plaque beneath it that read, "He took much, he returned little, he understood less, but he tried at the end to see." It was the most generous epitaph he could have hoped for, and far more than he deserved.